A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude. Today, I'm talking with Jackson. He is a talented graphic designer and a co-owner of a small business at 24 years old. He also happens to be my son. Jackson is going to share a bit about growing up with a parent who struggled with addiction and how he managed to find gratitude in the midst of that. And it's a really difficult reality. So welcome, Jackson. How are you doing today? Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be on.
I'm really happy that you're willing to talk about some of this stuff because I think that's really going to help a lot of people who are struggling with the very thing that you grew up with. So let me just ask you, how do you think having a parent who struggled with addiction changed you?
It's changed me in a lot of ways. Probably one of the biggest things is that I've decided not to do anything. So I'm not someone who drinks and I haven't used any drugs. I'm very careful about that. And I think I've realized that that was an escape mechanism for my dad.
Yeah.
So instead of doing that, I'm very cautious of anything that could lead into addiction. So even just playing video games, something I love to do, if it's not kept in check, is something that could become a problem. So I think one of the main things is I'm just conscious of everything I do, even if it's something small.
That's right. That's really good advice. You know, that if people have someone in their family who struggles with addiction, it is something that's hereditary.
Yeah, it's definitely something that can be passed down.
Yeah. Do you think you carry any anger or negativity with you from that time?
I did for a time, and we had a period where, my dad was still with us, and he was still in his addiction. But we eventually told him that he had to leave the home, and we had some time away from him. We had time to figure out who we were again without him. And I think we worked through forgiving him and setting healthy boundaries. So at this point, I've worked through most, if not all, of the anger that I had. But of course, immediately after he left, I still had issues with him.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's wonderful that you've been able to work through it and get kind of to the other side. In what ways do you think that your personal relationship with God, that your faith helped you?
Immensely. I mean, through high school, which was when he was still with us and actively drinking, I was very depressed. And I didn't realize it until the end of high school. But I had picked up on some things from him where I would isolate myself and I would just kind of sit with my depression. And after we told him that he had to leave and we started to figure out how to live healthily again, I went closer to God to figure out what my in-between time would be as I recovered. And God ended up becoming the thing that alcohol was to my dad, where if I was going to isolate myself and I was feeling depressed, I instead was able to go to God with it, and I was able to have healthy time alone instead.
Wow. Yeah.
Because I wasn't really alone, if you get me.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful that instead of turning to a vice, you turned to your faith and to the God that created you, who could actually do something about your situation. That's amazing.
Thank you.
So during that season when you were struggling with depression, like tell me more about that time. Like how did you get to the point where you did get out of it? Like how did you even let anyone know that you were depressed?
So my depression ramped up very slowly over time. So I ended up at the end of it where I would have days where I would put off all of my schoolwork. I would be anxious and procrastinate throughout the night. And then I would be so tired that I couldn't go to school. And
Mhm.
then we would call me out and I would still not do it the next day. And so as all of this stuff started to compound, I couldn't catch up anymore.
Yeah.
And I realized this is not normal. This is beyond being an anxious teenager
Yeah.
and I need some help. So I wrote a letter to get myself organized and figure out like this is what I think we need. I would like to ask for help. I would like to be medicated because I believe I need medication more than I need therapy.
Mhm.
I let you know that like I wasn't on the suicidal end of things. I was just depressed. So I wrote out my feelings. I got medicated and we had a source of the depression out. Dad had to move out, so
Mhm.
I focused on having a game plan, medication, and being in sort of a safe, healthy space,
Yeah.
and took it step at a time, really.
Yeah, I mean, one step at a time is how you really can change anything. You can't really, you have a goal, but I think it's so great that you sat down and had the foresight to write everything down. Um, you know, as the person that received that letter, it was really wonderful to see that you knew what was going on and you knew how you didn't feel too. You knew you didn't feel suicidal. You knew that you thought you needed some help. And I remember going to the doctor and he asked you certain questions and he was in agreement that you had a chemical imbalance and you went on a very tiny amount of medicine. And I remember how quickly it began to change things. So after the medicine was in your system and you were kind of, the factor that had been stressing you out and helping you get depressed, your father was no longer in the home. Then there was this season of rest. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I knew at the time that I wanted to have some time of rest, at least a gap year after high school ended. So we decided that we were financially stable enough that I didn't need to immediately get a job or go into higher education because I planned on doing graphic design of some sort. So even if I wasn't working or in college, I would be able to work on art in my free time.
Hmm.
So from a logistical standpoint, I was able to stay home. But also we had prayed about it and God answered us and he said, Jackson, this is a time of rest. So I ended up, I believe it was around 2 years, not just a gap year, but it ended up becoming around a 2 year spot where I was just allowed to rest and find myself. I didn't have any obligations beyond, taking care of myself, taking care of the dogs, that type of thing. And we really just figured out like we are going to have you become who you are supposed to be,
Yeah,
even if the world doesn't agree with it, type of a thing.
absolutely. Um,
Um, you go.
no, I was going to say, tell me a little bit more about like the world not getting it.
Yeah, so people are understanding of a gap year, but even that, at the end of high school, they're like, "Oh, we have a day for everyone wear what your college sweatshirt is," and I didn't have one.
Yeah.
And people will say, "Well, oh, if you have a gap year, are you traveling? Are you doing something with it?" And it's like, "No, I'm just staying home." And you get looks because it's so expected that you are going to immediately continue doing things, and you have to work to be valued.
Yeah.
And people in, even the church, people in our family, everyone was like, he should be working, he should be doing things. And even at the end of it, I myself started to feel guilty. Like, am I wasting this time? Am I just sleeping in late, playing video games, or should I be doing something? But God has a better plan than we do. Obviously, we prayed about it a lot before just committing this time.
Yeah.
And he was right. He slotted everything in perfectly for me to heal, for me to line up a next job type of a thing. I didn't have my license even to drive. He figured that out in time. Everything worked out perfectly when we listened to his plan. So
yeah, it all just kind of fell into a straight line. That's what happens when you listen to God. And, it was funny because, like you said, it wasn't just people who don't have a faith. It was people in the church too. Well, hasn't it been long enough? Or, well, what is he going to do next? And, sometimes when you listen to God, it's really hard because nobody will understand that you're following something that is counterintuitive to what happens in the world. And people don't take long times of rest, but there was quite a lot spoken over us and it needed to be undone. So it's really amazing how God took you from that place to being a co-owner of a company. So what was that like?
You sort of stormed in and you're like, Jackson, I have this great idea.
I never storm
And
in.
no, you came into my room. You said, Jackson, I have this great idea. We've had a book and it got very close to being published. And then it was shot down for various copyright style things where we had to get permission from people that we weren't comfortable getting permission from.
Mm-hmm.
So basically you're like, why don't we do it ourselves? And I was like, sure, why not? So you asked some people and who had experience, and you asked them, how hard is it? How much is the monetary startup cost? What are some things to look out for that you didn't know? And you are very creative and you are a great writer, and I am graphically inclined and I understand the technology side of things.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought we'll have pretty much all of the bases covered.
Yeah.
So it was your idea to push me to start going, and you had confidence in me. I had confidence in you.
Yeah.
And we were able to start a publishing company, and it kind of just flew by. So
yeah, it was pretty cool. Again, people, we did pray about this, but I stormed in after I heard from God. But what a great plan that God had, that Jackson held on to the positives through all these really difficult things. And then after the rest was able to use these God-given talents and abilities, and everything we do is for his kingdom. It's all Christian in its conception. We like to try and keep it open so that people who don't understand our faith or who don't know God can still interact and have kind of an everyday open forum in everything that we do, including this podcast. But how cool to go from, oh, why are you taking 2 gap years to, oh, you're 24 and you're a co-owner of a company. We've published 2 books, and now we're getting this podcast is being sponsored by the publishing house as well, and working on some other cool things. So how cool is that? Like, only God, right?
Yeah, of course.
So was it helpful to have another parent, one that was sober and a little more dependable? Did that help during the time when things were really bad with your dad?
Yeah, of course it did. If you don't have either parent, I can't imagine what that's like to have to rely on just friends or extended family. Having you in the home, knowing that you were always going to work hard to love me, to support me in whatever I did, to, even simple things like feed me and house me, some people don't have.
Yeah.
And I'm incredibly grateful for that, because if both parents were using as someone, like, if I had as much anxiety as I did going through high school, even with a fairly normal home, all things considered, I can't imagine having a 24/7 there's always someone doing something upsetting household.
Yeah.
There's no way I could do it. So it's a softball question. Of course, I was incredibly impacted by having a parent who was sober.
Yeah. Well, I can't imagine either, because I was the other adult, and it was crippling to me, what was going on. So that's why I asked. So if you had to go back and give your younger self any kind of advice, what would it be?
I would tell myself that high school seems incredibly important, and it's really not. That all of the social aspects and even my grades are not worth as much as I think they would be. And I would have probably also told myself to see a doctor or a therapist early, because I let it go on for a very long time. But also that things will go on whether I'm anxious or not. And there is a large part of my life that has changed purely because of my outlook on things.
Yeah.
People who know me as the level-headed, chill kind of a guy.
Yeah.
And even though to a degree I put on that persona in high school when I was younger, it really wasn't a heart thing. I didn't understand it fully.
Yeah.
And of course, while I was a Christian, I knew God had me. Your brain and your heart are two different things. So I now am always on the path of, if I lost my home today, life would go on. If I don't know where I'm sleeping or where my next meal is, life will go on. God is good. He has me, kind of a stupid, childlike faith, as they say.
It's a very wise faith. I mean, honestly, as an adult, I still sometimes turn to you for prayer or opinion, because you have that like sturdy faith in him. It doesn't waver, it seems. And it's really wonderful. Well, it seems like it doesn't. So it's wonderful to be around. There's a time that I'm just remembering now when you had a really strange medical problem that's really hard to pronounce. And I remember that being a time that really your faith was just really forged. Like, I remember you being so steadfast during that time. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so it was a disease that was described to me as something that will show up out of nowhere, and eventually you can grow out of it overnight as well. It was something where I had too much stomach acid being produced, and it was kind of like heartburn turned up a notch, where it would come up through my esophagus and touch my vocal cords, which, when they are agitated in that way, can close my throat. And normally, for like 99 or something % of the time, people who have this disease have this throat closing for 30 seconds maximum, normally 15 or less. But it's something that can happen when you are laying down, when you are asleep, when you are, in a store, standing up. It's kind of all the time. But when it happened to us, it's something that has never happened before in the middle of the night, and your son can't breathe.
Yeah.
It's kind of shocking to a parent.
Gosh, it was horrible.
So the first time it happened, we didn't really know what it was, and we were like, that's not normal. That's not just normal indigestion or heartburn.
Yeah.
So we got it checked out. We figured out what the name was called. It was hard to pronounce, but I remember specifically that it happened for a pretty decent span of time, and almost every time, because I was your child, you would freak out.
Yes.
And I would try to convey to you without speaking, because my throat was closed, that I'm okay and it will pass. And it did, and I've outgrown it since then, and I'm very thankful.
Yes. The thing that I remember the very first night when we didn't know what it was, and I had my phone out and I was all ready to dial 911, and you didn't know what was going on, but you kind of cautioned me to just kind of put your hand up to wait. And later on, when you could speak, you said, "Mom, I just leaned into God. I just said, God, are you there? Is this okay?" And he said, "Yeah, it's fine." And I just knew it was going to be okay. And I'll never forget that, that you had that at such a young age. So in the midst of all this other crazy stuff, your faith was being really forged and formed. And I don't think we like to look at the fact that like negative things make us strong, but like in what ways do you think all the struggle that we went through during that time like helped you, made you stronger, more compassionate?
Oh, if I didn't have the life I've had with the struggles that I've had, I would be a completely different person.
Yeah.
I believe, far more compassionate to others, understanding of circumstance, forgiving and patient. I didn't I didn't realize how patient I was until multiple people told me.
Yeah.
It was one of those things that like you just don't see yourself in the same way others see you.
Yeah.
But if I didn't have to deal with my situation and understand that others can be dealing with the same type of situation, even if I'm further along in that journey, then I feel like I would have been far more privileged and self-centered than I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would probably treat others more harshly because I don't fully grasp how their home life can be separate than them working at a store serving me.
Yeah. I do believe it helped you in ways that nobody wants to look at. Good character coming from difficult things, but I mean, you're just such a kind and compassionate person, and you are always um, giving people kind of turning the other cheek and giving them another chance. And it's wonderful to see that God can bring good things out of difficult things. So, your dad was an artist, and so are you. Is there any redeeming like connection in that, or memories, or good things that you bring out of that?
Yeah, so the main thing really that I remember about Dad is his art. They say negative things have a larger impact on memory, but on the opposite end, I remember how great he was as an artist in seemingly every medium. He
Mm-hmm.
would make paintings. He had a phase where he would do those bead creatures with
Mm-hmm.
wire and beads.
Yeah.
He did faux stained glass. He was a great pencil sketcher.
Mm-hmm.
He worked digitally as well. His
Yeah.
job for a few years was on magazines, and he was the one that taught me everything I know about Photoshop. So it was always fun to grow up in an artist household because you also love to do artistic things, not always in the same traditional sense, but you love
Right.
to decorate. I think you're also a wonderful painter.
Thank you.
So it was always fun to be with my dad when he was painting, and I always had a respect for how good of a classical artist he was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
That's
that's
awesome that you can
yeah.
have like that one kind of redeeming good memory.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, and I know the answer, but for other people listening, like when's the last time that you spoke with your dad?
I'm always bad at large scale time, but it's been a few years now. We told him that he was not allowed to come back to the home if he was not going to pick up his act. So he found a spot and moved out. And we gave him the boundaries that we aren't comfortable right now with calling you. Can you please write letters? And he
Mm-hmm.
agreed. And for a time, he would keep up with that. And in those letters, he would draw us things and, send little stickers and things like that. And so it was good, and we agreed that we could continue talking with him and we could visit with him. Well, after a while, as far as I know, for no reason other than he didn't feel like it was adequate enough, he would stop sending letters because he felt there wasn't enough to tell us. So we said, please just send us anything, even if it's a mundane list of what you did for the day. If you would like to keep up contact with us, please send us letters, because we still thought that calling him was not the right avenue of keeping in touch.
When he called, unfortunately, he couldn't keep a boundary and would start calling multiple times a day, calling while we were working. And it was just, he wasn't really good at his own boundaries. So we had to have really hard boundaries. And I know during the times that he wrote, we went up several times to visit him. He was living up in the mountains, and tried to have like positive times with him. But at some point, he chose not to be consistent and just kind of fell away. And it's been a couple of years, and it's a shame. I was hoping that, we could at least keep some kind of relationship, but, we can't make choices for other people. And that's one of the things in dealing with somebody in your family who has addiction that's so important to know, that you didn't create it and you can't stop it. It's not your job. Your job is to do what you can to be healthy yourself, whatever that is, and to not enable that person. So obviously you've learned about healthy boundaries. How have they helped you move on, do you think?
It's at this point, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. Being able to set a healthy boundary is incredibly important, especially when the other party is not able to set them for themselves.
Yeah.
So a healthy boundary should be something that helps both of you stay healthy, stay safe, stay consistent, something that makes you happier, something that makes life easier, but not in a way that you are shirking responsibility, but in a way that like the weight is lifted off of you. Something that was weighing on your life all the time shouldn't be anymore.
Yeah.
So at the time, it was incredibly important to say, like, I'm not comfortable speaking to you or hearing your voice. I don't mind communicating with you, but I can't hear you, type of a thing.
Yeah. It's just a really tricky situation. And unfortunately, even with him having social workers and other people trying to help him, he had to make final choices. So, do you have any advice for other children or family members going through like a similar situation?
It's hard to say anything without knowing a person's specific situation, but if there is any way to get them help, whether that is into rehab or to have like a family intervention and make a plan with them, they need to somehow choose for themselves that they want to get better. And if you can aid them in any way, that's great. But if they will not decide to beat the addiction on their own, they will not stick with any program you give them. Even if they say you are their world, they're doing it for you, that's not good enough. And as much as it might hurt you to cut them off, that may be the healthiest boundary that you can set for both of you.
Yeah, it's important at some point to not enable, and for you to be safe and for them to be safe, sometimes you have to have them removed from the house. And I'll never forget when he had gone into a rehab that I had taken him to. When we went back as a family to say, hey, this time, because this was not the first time, we're not going to have you come back. I need your keys. You're no longer welcome to come back to the house until you can get into recovery. And it just never happened. And I know that our lives have changed exponentially. And I feel at this point like we're back to kind of who we were supposed to be. There's a lot of joy and lightness, and no more walking on eggshells, and no more wondering where somebody is or what they're doing. No more surprises. And that is a good thing. As I said, I wish things had worked out better for him, but that was his choice. Well, Jackson, I just want to thank you again for sharing today. As the podcast host, I'm grateful. But as your mom, I'm so proud of you and your choices, your vulnerability and honesty today. You're one of the things that I'm most grateful for in my life. And so, having a podcast like this and having the opportunity to share you and who you are with others is really a great thing. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so happy to be able to come on and hopefully help someone who might be going through something similar, or at least just have them relate.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you. Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing, one thing to be thankful for. If you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be